They exiled her for bringing bad luck, until the Alpha King discovered she was his fortune. The wind howled across the frozen plains, carrying the scent of pine and distant snow. In the heart of the kingdom of Thalarian, whispers of omens and dark luck filled the corridors of the castle. It was said that the child born under the red moon would bring misfortune, that storms would rise where her shadow fell, that she would be the ruin of kings. That child was Leora. She was only 5 years old when the elders deemed her cursed. Her father, a minor noble, had vanished years before under mysterious circumstances, and her mother had died giving birth to her. Alone, fragile and small, Leora had no voice in the halls that decided her fate. The king, a stern man of iron and law, declared that she must leave the kingdom, for her presence threatened the balance of Thalarian. A carriage took her away under a gray dawn, the snow blinding in its silence. The villagers who had once whispered about her now turned their faces, refusing to meet her eyes. Leora's small hands pressed against the frosted glass as the castle faded behind her, a towering monument of warmth, order, and rejection. Her heart ached with a loneliness she did not understand, yet beneath the fear there was a quiet spark, a stubborn flame of life refusing to die. The carriage stopped at the edge of the wildlands, a stretch of forest and mountains no map claimed as safe. There, an old woman named Mara waited, her eyes sharp yet kind. Mara had been a healer in the castle, whispered to practice forbidden arts, but she had refused to leave the child. "You must learn to survive here," Mara said, her voice gentle but firm. "The world will not welcome you, Leora, but you have a power they cannot see. One day, you will understand why you were sent away."
The first night in the wildlands was bitter.
Wolves howled in the distance and shadows danced among the trees like living spirits. Leora trembled, yet she did not cry. She learned quickly that the forest was neither cruel nor kind. It simply was. She found berries, learned which roots could be boiled into a warm broth, and how to build a shelter that could withstand the snowstorms. Her tiny hands grew calloused, her body strong. But it was not just survival that taught her strength. Leora discovered that she could sense things others could not. A shadow passing too silently, a whisper carried on the wind, a sudden shift in the air. These were not ordinary observations. She learned to listen to the forest, to feel it, and slowly she understood that there was magic in her blood. Subtle yet undeniable. Years passed, and Leora grew into a girl with eyes like storm clouds and hair as dark as midnight. The villagers had called her cursed, but the wildlands had called her their own. Yet even here, alone and untamed, she could not escape the memory of her exile. Often by the river that cut through the frozen woods she would stare at her reflection, asking the question she had carried since childhood. Why was I cast away? Was I truly a curse? Meanwhile, far beyond the wildlands, the Alpha King Kael ruled the kingdom with a measured hand. Stories of him were told across the lands, the fearless hunter, the stern ruler, the man who could command loyalty with a glance. Yet Kael's strength was not only in his sword or his army, it was in his understanding of power and destiny. He had long sensed a shift in the winds, a faint tremor in the kingdom's magic, though he could not yet name its source. One winter's evening, Kael rode to the edge of the forest, his white stallion treading carefully over the frozen earth. He paused, sensing something extraordinary. There, in the clearing, a figure moved among the snow and shadows. A girl, tall now with a presence that tugged at something deep within him. Her eyes met his, wide with caution and fire, and Kael felt a pulse of destiny he had never known. But Leora, ever wary, vanished before he could step closer. She melted into the woods like a whisper, leaving only the echo of her presence behind. Kael frowned, his curiosity piqued. This was no ordinary girl! Something about her drew him, a force that felt older than the mountains and stronger than any law. Leora's days continued in a quiet rhythm of survival and training. She practiced archery, honed her instincts, and explored the magic that stirred within her. Sometimes she would hear the faintest voice on the wind, words she could not understand, yet they called to her. They whispered of a kingdom in peril, of a king who would need her, and of a destiny she could not yet accept. The forest was both teacher and friend, but it was also full of reminders of what she had lost. The sound of a distant carriage reminded her of the castle gates. The echoes of children's laughter brought memories she could no longer claim, and yet each hardship carved a piece of steel into her soul. Leora learned that strength and compassion could coexist, that her exile had forged a courage even kings might envy. One day, as she wandered near the icy river, she discovered a wounded stag caught in a hunter's trap. Its eyes, wide with fear, reminded her of herself as a child. Carefully, she freed the creature, murmuring gentle words. The stag lingered for a moment, gazing at her with an almost human understanding, then disappeared into the trees. That night she felt something awaken inside her, a connection to life and fate, a spark that hinted she was more than just a survivor. As Leora slept beneath the stars, Mara watched from the shadows. The healer knew that the time was approaching when Leora's exile would no longer protect her. Forces beyond the forest were stirring, and the girl who had once been called a curse would soon step into a world that feared her power. Far away, Cale returned to his throne, but the memory of the girl lingered. He could not shake the feeling that destiny had touched him, that the winds of the kingdom were shifting because of her. And somewhere deep inside, he wondered if the girl he had glimpsed might change everything he thought he knew about fate and fortune. The night grew colder, and the moon rose high, casting silver light over the wild lands. Leora opened her eyes, staring at the stars, feeling the pull of something she could neither name nor ignore. A voice whispered in her mind, "Not Mara's, not the winds, but something older, something ancient. You were not cast away to be forgotten. You were cast away to be found." Leora shivered. The forest seemed to lean closer, listening. Her heart raced with a mixture of fear, hope, and a longing she could not explain. Could she truly be more than the curse they claimed her to be? Could she step into a destiny greater than the wild lands, greater than herself? At the edge of the clearing, just beyond the reach of her firelight, a shadow watched. Not a wolf, not a spirit, but a man. Tall, strong, and impossibly composed. His eyes, like storm clouds themselves, held an intensity that made her pulse quicken. He did not move closer, yet somehow she knew he had seen her. The wind carried his presence, and for the first time Leora felt both fear and recognition. She could not speak, could not move. She only felt the pull of something that defied explanation. Then, as quickly as he appeared, he vanished into the night, leaving Leora trembling. A strange mixture of dread and anticipation filled her chest. For the first time, she realized that her exile might not be the end of her story, but only the beginning. Somewhere deep in the forest, the old magic stirred, and the stars themselves seemed to pulse with expectation. Leora did not yet understand what was happening, but her heart whispered the truth. Her life, her curse, and her exile were threads in a tapestry far larger than she could see. And in that moment, beneath the pale silver light of the red moon, Leora made a silent vow. She would face whatever came next, no matter the danger, no matter the king who waited in the shadows. The snow fell softly, covering the wildlands in white, yet leaving footprints that marked the beginning of a destiny that would change the kingdom forever. Winter's breath still lingered over the kingdom of Thalorian, frost glinting along the castle walls like shattered glass. Inside the grand halls, the Alpha King, Cale, sat upon his throne, reviewing letters from distant provinces. The kingdom had grown uneasy. Wolves prowled the borders, rival clans whispered of rebellion, and strange omens had appeared in the sky. Moons that glimmered red, storms that broke with unnatural fury. Cale's mind, sharp as a blade, sensed a shifting current, something he could neither control nor ignore. He had felt it before, months ago, when a shadow crossed the edge of the wildlands. A girl, tall, dark-haired, with eyes that mirrored the storm, had watched him from the forest, vanishing before he could reach her. That fleeting image had haunted him ever since, and now he knew he must seek her out. Far in the wildlands, Leora moved silently among the trees, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. She had learned to navigate the forest like a shadow, her senses tuned to every movement, every whisper of life. But a disturbance had reached her that morning. a trembling in the earth, a faint call she could not place. Something or someone was approaching. It was then that she saw him. Kale. The Alpha King, riding with a presence that demanded attention, even in the untamed forest. His white stallion pawed at the frozen ground, steam rising from its flanks. His eyes, dark, stormy, unyielding, met hers across the clearing. Leora froze, 1,000 emotions colliding inside her. Fear, curiosity, and an unexpected, inexplicable recognition. "You are Leora," Kale said, his voice calm but commanding, cutting through the cold like sunlight through ice. "I have been looking for you." Leora's hand went instinctively to the dagger she carried at her belt. "You do not know me," she said, her voice steady though her heart beat fast. "Stay away, or you will regret it." Kale's gaze softened just slightly.
I know enough.
"You are not what they claimed. You are something far greater." Her eyes narrowed. "I am a curse," she said. "The kingdom cast me away." "The king! Your people! They called me a bringer of misfortune." Kale's jaw tightened. They were wrong.
But the truth is not simple, Leora. You have power, a gift that has been hidden from this world.
And soon it will be needed. Leora's pulse quickened. For years she had wondered if the stories of her curse were true, if the strange ability she had felt stirring within her were a blessing or a danger. And now, the king who had exiled her as a child stood before her, acknowledging the truth she had only begun to understand. "I am no one's gift," she said firmly, stepping back. "I survived on my own. I do not need the throne, the kingdom, or your protection." Kale dismounted, landing lightly in the snow. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension. "You misunderstand. I am not here to control you. I am here because the kingdom, my people, cannot survive without you. And neither can I." Leora studied him, noting the quiet authority in his stance, the strength that radiated from him, and a vulnerability hidden deep behind his stormy eyes. She had been alone for so long, and yet a part of her longed to trust him. But trust had always been a dangerous luxury. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why now, after all these years?" Kale's eyes flickered, and for a moment he seemed almost human, stripped of the armor of the throne. "Because," he said softly, "you were never a curse. You were always my fortune, and now I cannot let you remain hidden in the forest. The time has come for you to step into the world you were denied." The words stirred something deep in Leora. She had survived exile, mastered the wild, and learned the forest's secret magic. But the thought of returning to the kingdom, the place that had cast her away, filled her with fear. Yet beneath the fear a strange warmth blossomed, recognition perhaps, or the first glimmer of hope that her life had purpose beyond survival. Kale extended his hand. "Come with me, not as a subject, not as a pawn. Come as yourself. There is a place for you at my side." Leora hesitated, torn between instinct and longing. Her hand hovered over his for a heartbeat, and then she shook her head. "I am not ready." Kale did not move back. "Then we wait, but you must know. Time does not wait, Leora. Forces are gathering, and soon the kingdom will demand your presence, whether you wish it or not." Days passed in the forest. Kale returned to the kingdom, leaving Leora to contemplate his words. She wandered to the river that cut through the wildlands, watching her reflection ripple in the icy water. Could she truly be more than the exile they had labeled her? Could she embrace the magic that had always been hers, and the destiny the king had spoken of? A week later, a messenger arrived in the wildlands, an injured fox running toward Leora with a letter tied to its leg. It bore the seal of Kale himself. Her hands shook as she broke it open. "Leora, the kingdom faces threats that cannot be ignored. You must come, for the storm gathers, and only you can guide us through it." I will wait for you at the castle, and I will protect you." The message stirred a fire in her chest. The forest had nurtured her, taught her, made her strong. But the world beyond, the world that had exiled her, was calling again. That night she packed her few belongings, a cloak of fur, her bow, the dagger that had kept her alive. Mara appeared from the shadows, her eyes heavy with both worry and pride. "You are choosing to step into the world that they cast you from," Mara said softly. "It will not be easy. You will face fear, betrayal, and danger, but you will also find who you are meant to be. Remember, Leora, courage is not the absence of fear. It is the strength to face it." Leora hugged Mara tightly. "I will not forget you, and I will return stronger." The journey to the castle was perilous. Leora moved silently, avoiding patrols, navigating forests and frozen rivers, her senses sharper than ever. She discovered that her magic, the subtle command over nature and life, had grown stronger. Snow seemed to bend around her feet, shadows softened at her presence, and creatures of the forest seemed to guide her path. When she finally reached the outer walls of the castle, night had fallen. The moon hung low and red in the sky, reflecting on the icy towers like molten fire. Leora's heart pounded. The gates loomed before her, guarded by soldiers who could not recognize the girl they had once cast aside. She could have turned back. She could have disappeared into the forest and remained free. But she did not. She stepped forward, letting the magic of the wildlands guide her. The gates parted as if welcoming her, though the soldiers watched in wary silence. Word of her return had reached the castle. Whispers filled the halls like the wind through empty corridors. Some feared her. Others were curious. Kale waited in the throne room, his armor glinting in torchlight, his eyes scanning the entrance until they found her. He did not rise immediately. Instead, he studied her, his gaze holding an intensity that made her pulse race. She felt exposed, yet seen in a way no one ever had. "You came," he said, almost in wonder. "I came," she replied, her voice steady, though her chest still fluttered with fear. Kale moved toward her. Slow, deliberate. "You are more than I imagined," he said. "Stronger. Wiser. Even the forest cannot contain your spirit." Leora's eyes met his, searching for meaning in his words. "And yet, I am still a stranger here," she said quietly. "The kingdom, they rejected me." Kale's expression softened. "Then let us change that. You are no longer in exile, Leora. From this day forward, you are part of something greater." "But it will not be easy. There are those who will challenge you, who will see your presence as a threat. You must be ready." Leora felt a shiver run through her. She had survived the wild, mastered its trials, yet the court, the throne, the people who had cast her away, they were an unknown she had never faced. And still something inside her stirred. The pull of destiny, the call of purpose, and the strange, growing feeling that Kale's presence was not just power, it was a promise. That night, Leora stood on the balcony of the castle, looking out over the kingdom. Snow fell silently over the rooftops, and the wind carried a faint whisper, a voice she could almost understand. "The storm gathers, but the heart of fortune stands ready." She turned, finding Kale behind her, quiet, steady, his presence both commanding and gentle. "Are you afraid?" he asked.
"Always," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "But perhaps some fear is worth facing." Kale nodded, a faint smile touching his lips.
"Then we face it together." The wind howled outside, carrying whispers of danger, magic, and fate. Somewhere in the shadows, forces stirred, watching, waiting. Leora knew the path ahead would test her in ways the forest never could. And yet, for the first time in her life, she felt a spark of hope. She was no longer alone, and her exile was over. The castle of Thalorian was quieter than usual, but silence carried a weight heavier than any storm. Leora had spent weeks learning the rhythm of the court, observing its courtiers and servants, listening to whispers and rumors that floated like smoke in the grand halls. The walls, once cold and intimidating, now felt alive with secrets, each corridor hiding a story, a threat, or a truth waiting to be discovered. Cale had taken her under his protection, not as a subject but as an equal in the unseen battles of power that shaped the kingdom. Still, the court was not kind to strangers, and the whispers of the cursed girl returned began to spread. Eyes watched her wherever she went, voices murmured of danger and destiny alike. Leora felt the weight of every gaze, the tension of every unspoken accusation, and yet she did not falter. She had learned in the wildlands that fear could be a teacher, and strength was forged through trial. But the palace demanded a different kind of skill, subtlety, patience, and careful observation. Leora walked through the halls as if she belonged, though her heart raced with every suspicious glance. One evening, Cale called her to the strategy chamber, a room lined with maps of the kingdom and surrounding lands. Candles flickered, casting shadows that danced on the walls like living spirits. The king's usual stern expression softened as he gestured for her to sit. "The kingdom faces threats from both without and within," Cale said, his finger tracing a route on the map. "Rival clans grow bold, emboldened by the strange omens in the north, and some in my own court. They see you as a threat. They underestimate you, Leora, and that is a mistake we cannot afford." Leora leaned over the map, noting the positions of enemy forces and weak borders. Her fingers brushed lightly over the inked lines, feeling the pull of the land. The forest had taught her to read the whispers of nature, and now she found herself reading the quiet stirrings of men, their hidden desires and schemes.
I can help, she said, her voice steady.
"Not as a weapon, but as someone who can see what others miss. I've learned to notice what is hidden." Cale studied her, the corners of his mouth tugging in a small, approving smile. "You have grown strong, more than I expected." And yet, strength alone is not enough here. Trust is a currency more precious than gold. Before Leora could respond, a messenger arrived, bowing low. He handed Cale a sealed letter, the wax marked with the emblem of one of the kingdom's most ambitious lords, a man known for his cunning and jealousy. Cale's eyes darkened as he read the message. "They know of your arrival," he said, handing the letter to Leora. "They seek to turn the people against you, to make the king doubt the choice he has made." Leora's heart sank. She had expected suspicion, perhaps even fear, but betrayal struck differently. The people who had once exiled her now plotted to use her, twist her story, and claim the power she had survived to wield. Yet, beneath the fear, she felt a spark of determination. She would not let them control her, nor would she allow Cale to fight alone. That night, Leora wandered the castle gardens, seeking the quiet comfort of moonlight and frost. Snow crunched beneath her boots as she moved along the frozen paths, her breath forming clouds in the crisp air. She felt the stir of her magic, subtle but growing, like a pulse within her veins. The forest had taught her patience, and now the palace taught her caution. A shadow moved in the periphery of her vision, and she tensed, hand on the hilt of her dagger. From the darkness stepped Saren, a court advisor known for his charm and his ambition. He bowed, but Leora sensed the weight of danger beneath the gesture. "Leora," he said smoothly, "the king values your presence, but not all see your arrival as fortuitous. Some believe your abilities may upset the balance of power." "I am no threat," Leora replied, her voice calm but firm. "I seek only to help." Saren's eyes glinted with something cold, something calculating. "Power is rarely offered without cost. Even the king must weigh the consequences. Consider carefully where your loyalty lies." He turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving Leora with a lingering unease. The castle was alive with intrigue, and she was no longer just an exile. It was clear she was a pawn in a much larger game. But Leora had survived the wildlands. She had learned to fight in silence, to read the unseen currents. And she would not be moved so easily. The following days were tense. Leora worked alongside Cale, studying maps, reviewing reports, and training in the small courtyard beneath the castle walls. Cale watched her closely, offering guidance, but also allowing her freedom. The bond between them deepened, subtle and unspoken, filled with moments of quiet understanding, shared glances, and a recognition of each other's strength. One night, Cale led her to the highest tower, where the wind whipped around them and the stars stretched endlessly above. "Do you understand now?" he asked, his voice low, carrying both warning and wonder. "Your exile was not a punishment. It was preparation."
The kingdom, the people, even I, we all need what you have to give.
Leora shivered, not from the cold, but from the weight of destiny pressing down on her.
I do not know if I am ready," she admitted. "The court, the threats, the magic, it is all more than I expected." Cale stepped closer, his presence commanding and protective. "You are stronger than you think, and you are not alone. I will stand beside you, but you must trust yourself as well. Your power is a gift, Leora, not a curse. Remember that." Her heart quickened. The forest had taught her survival, the wildlands had taught her strength, and now the palace would teach her courage. And Cale had taught her that she could belong, that she could be more than an exile. The peace was short-lived. A sudden alarm rang through the castle, a warning of intruders. Soldiers ran through the halls, their boots echoing like thunder. Leora and Cale raced to the battlements, where they saw a group of masked figures moving swiftly, intent on sabotage. Their plan was subtle but dangerous. Set fire to the granary and create chaos, turning the people against Cale and, by extension, Leora. Leora's instincts kicked in. She raised her bow, her hand steady despite the pounding of her heart. Shadows shifted in her favor as her magic, subtle but potent, guided her movements. Arrows flew with precision, disabling the intruder silently. Cale fought alongside her, his sword cutting through the cold night with unmatched skill. In the chaos, Leora saw Siren at the edge of the crowd, watching, smiling faintly as the plan unfolded. Betrayal burned in her chest, not just for herself, but for Cale, for the kingdom he loved, and for the trust that had been offered to her. When the intruders fled, Leora and Cale stood amidst the quiet aftermath. The granary was safe, the castle intact, but the air was thick with tension. Cale looked at her, pride and concern mixing in his stormy gaze. "You have done more than I imagined," he said softly. "But beware, the enemy is not always obvious. Some are closer than you think." Leora nodded, her mind racing. Betrayal had a face now, and it was not hidden behind a mask. It lived within the castle walls among those who should have been allies, yet she felt no fear, only resolve. The forest had made her strong, the wildlands had taught her resilience, and now the palace would teach her strategy. As the night deepened, Leora found herself standing on the balcony once more. The moon hung low and red, casting silver light over the snow-covered courtyard. The wind carried whispers of the past and warnings of the future. Her heart ached with longing, not just for freedom, but for understanding, for belonging, for a future she was only beginning to imagine. Cale joined her silently, his hand brushing against hers. "Do you feel it?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the wind. "The stirrings of something greater?" Leora nodded, her eyes fixed on the horizon.
"Yes," she said. "I feel it."
"And I am ready to face it." Cale's gaze softened, his hand holding hers firmly. "Then we face it together. Whatever comes, we do not falter. Whatever the court, whatever the enemy, you and I, we stand as one." The wind howled around them, carrying a sense of destiny, danger, and promise. But even as they stood together, Leora felt a shift in the air, subtle yet undeniable. Shadows moved in the corners of the castle, whispers of betrayal yet unseen, forces that would challenge everything she had come to believe. And then, from the deepest part of the castle, a cold voice spoke. One she knew immediately, though she had not expected it. "Do you truly think the king can protect you, little exile? The storm has only begun." Leora turned sharply, her pulse racing. The figure disappeared before she could see its face, leaving only the echo of menace in the stone halls. Her bow felt heavy in her hands. Her heart beat faster than ever. The castle was no longer a sanctuary. The court was no longer just a stage. Danger had moved close, and the battle for her destiny, her life, her power, and the kingdom had truly begun. The first light of dawn crept over the towers of Thalorian, pale and cold, yet filled with promise. The kingdom had been restless for days. Rumors of unrest had spread like wildfire through the courts, secret alliances, whispered betrayals, and the shadow of forces neither seen nor named. Leora stood on the balcony of the highest tower, her dark hair whipping in the wind, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The forest of her exile lay beyond the castle walls, a place that had taught her survival, strength, and patience. Yet the kingdom, the walls she had once feared, the halls that had once rejected her, now demanded her courage. And the weight of destiny pressed down on her shoulders, stronger than any snowstorm or winter gale she had ever faced. Cale approached silently, his presence steady, like a rock in a river of chaos. He rested a hand on her shoulder, not possessive but grounding, reminding her that she was no longer alone. "The storm is coming!" Cale said, his voice low, almost a whisper over the wind. "They have gathered their forces, both within the walls and beyond them. Tonight we face the culmination of everything." Leora drew a deep breath. Her bow rested against her back, her dagger at her side, and a quiet hum of magic pulsed through her veins. The forest had taught her that power was not in force alone, it was in timing, in connection, and in knowing when to act. Tonight, that knowledge would be tested like never before. The first sign came as the sun dipped behind the mountains. A dark banner rose in the distance, moving toward the castle, under the cover of twilight. It was not just a band of rebels or rival lords. The shadow carried with it the taint of the unnatural, a reminder of the magic that had always lurked at the edges of the kingdom. Leora felt it in her bones, a pulse of energy, cold and relentless. Cale mounted his white stallion, and Leora moved beside him, silent and resolute. "We do not fight alone," he said. "We fight as one." Inside the castle, the courtiers and soldiers readied themselves. Some looked at Leora with fear, some with hope, but all sensed that the outcome of this battle rested in her hands as much as Cale's. She stepped into the throne room, feeling the pulse of power in the air, and for a moment, the exile she had once been seemed impossibly far away. Then came the first wave. Shadows moved along the outer walls, striking silently, seeking to create chaos and fear. Leora's instincts took over. She let her magic guide her arrows, each one flying true, striking without warning. The shadows hesitated, some retreating, others faltering. Cale fought beside her, a whirlwind of strength and precision. Sword met darkened blade, each strike echoing with authority and the promise of protection. Together they were a force neither the traitors nor the enemy had expected, yet the greatest threat was inside. Leora felt it first, a chill running along her spine, a whisper of betrayal. Suren, the advisor whose ambition had twisted him, emerged from the shadows of the castle library, a dagger glinting in his hand, eyes filled with greed and resentment. "You think you can protect him?" Suren sneered, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "You are just a girl, a curse they call fortune." "You cannot stand against me!"
Leora's hands did not shake.
The forest, the wildlands, and the castle had all prepared her. "I am no one's curse," she said, her voice strong, steady, resonating with the magic she had long feared. "And I am stronger than you know." The air crackled as her power surged, subtle at first, then unstoppable. Shadows that had lingered in the corners recoiled, and the walls themselves seemed to bend to her will. Suren lunged, but Leora moved with the precision of a hunter, her dagger finding its mark without hesitation. Magic flared as the shadows around him twisted, breaking like ice under sunlight, and Suren was thrown back, unconscious. Cale's eyes held pride and wonder. "You have mastered it," he said, almost in awe. "Your power! It is extraordinary!" Leora nodded, her chest heaving. "I've learned that fear does not define me. Survival does. Courage does. And love, sometimes love gives the strength to stand against anything." The battle raged through the castle and the outer walls. The rival forces had underestimated the strength of the king and the girl they once exiled. Leora and Cale moved as one, he protecting, she striking, each anticipating the other's movements. Their bond had deepened through days of trust, shared danger, and quiet understanding. Now it manifested in perfect harmony, a force that even the shadows could not break. Hours passed like minutes, and finally, the last of the intruders were driven back. The banners that had marched against the castle fell, the soldiers fled, and the halls, though scarred and battered, stood intact. The kingdom had survived. In the quiet that followed, Leora stood in the throne room, looking at the walls that had once exiled her. Cale joined her, his hand finding hers without words, their connection deeper than it had ever been. "You have saved more than the kingdom," Cale said softly. "You have saved us all, from fear, from doubt, and from ourselves." Leora felt tears prick her eyes, but she did not turn away. "And I have found belonging, not in exile, not in fear, but here with you, with the kingdom that I once thought would never accept me." Cale's stormy eyes softened. "You are no longer an exile. You are the queen the kingdom needed, the fortune I could never have imagined." The people of the kingdom gathered outside the castle, seeing the girl who had returned as a threat now standing victorious, her dark hair shining in the sunlight, her eyes reflecting both power and compassion. Whispers turned to awe, fear to respect. They saw not a curse, but a hero. That evening, Leora and Cale stood together on the balcony, overlooking the kingdom they had saved. Snow blanketed the rooftops, the trees glistened in frost, and the wind carried the faint scent of the forest she had once called home. The world felt infinite and yet intimate, as if every star above existed only for this moment. "I never thought I would belong anywhere," Leora admitted, her voice soft. "I thought I would always be running, hiding, surviving alone." Cale took her hand, holding it firmly. "You were never alone, Leora. Even in exile, even in fear, you were shaping your destiny. And now, together, we can face whatever comes next." The night was still, and yet alive with magic. Leora felt the pulse of the kingdom, the heartbeat of the land, and the stirring of forces beyond her understanding. But unlike before, fear did not hold her. She had faced betrayal, darkness, and the judgment of the world, and emerged stronger, wiser, and unafraid. Cale's voice broke the silence, low and intimate. "Do you trust me?" Leora looked at him, seeing not the king alone, but the man who had sought her, who had protected her, who had recognized her as more than a curse. "I trust you," she said, her voice steady. "And I trust myself." He smiled, the faintest curve of lips that carried relief, hope, and something unspoken yet undeniable. "Then we are ready," he said. "For the future, for the kingdom, and for us." The wind swirled around them, carrying whispers of the forest and the wild lands, a reminder of where she had come from and how far she had grown. Magic lingered in the air, a promise of protection, strength, and destiny fulfilled. For the first time in her life, Leora felt whole. She was no longer the cursed child exiled into the cold. She was no longer the shadow in the forest. She was queen, protector, and fortune. And she had chosen her place not because the kingdom demanded it, but because she had earned it. In the weeks that followed, Leora's presence in the court transformed the kingdom. Fear gave way to respect, whispers to admiration. The people saw a leader who understood strength and compassion, strategy and intuition, courage and heart. And Cale, the Alpha King who had once ruled with stern authority, found his heart softened by her influence, his reign tempered with empathy and wisdom. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Leora returned to the forest that had once been her only home. The snow was soft beneath her boots, and the trees swayed gently in greeting. She touched the trunk of a familiar oak, feeling the pulse of life, the memory of survival, and the strength she had gained. The forest had taught her courage, and now she carried it into the world beyond. Cale joined her silently, his presence a quiet reassurance. "You have changed the kingdom," he said.
And you have changed me.
Leora smiled, warmth spreading through her chest.
We change each other, she replied, and together we can face whatever the future holds.
The wind carried a soft whisper through the trees, a voice ancient and knowing. The exile is no more. The fortune stands.
The storm has passed, and a new dawn rises. They stood together hand in hand, looking out over the kingdom and the wildlands beyond, knowing that while challenges would come, they had faced the greatest storms already.
They had survived betrayal, embraced their destiny, and discovered the strength of love, courage, and trust. And in the quiet glow of the red moon, Leora finally understood. She had been exiled not to end her story, but to begin it.